Hey everyone, I have a really exciting show for you today. I have someone that just released a book, but more importantly, he's been in the real estate business for nearly 20 years. And I think you're going to love his story, kind of where it started, how he got through some trials and tribulations and ultimately came out the other side. So it's going to be a really exciting story today. So Steven Rosenberg, how you doing this morning?
I'm good. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing very well. I think where I want to start with your interview and your story is you had what most would consider a very safe and secure job, right? You were in a profession that really you could call your own shots. You had a path to just keep doing that. So why don't you kind of tell us what that was and what happened that made you go, you know what, I need to look for a plan B.
Sure. Yeah. So I was or still am an airline pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And my story, I was one of those people as a little kid, didn't know anything about airplanes, aviation. I would look up in the sky and you see those things and you think, man, how do people do that?
Right.
So going to school, grew up in Los Angeles and started learning to fly, took lessons and everything. And I was a pretty tenacious person, very driven in anything that I did, whether it was sports, working out, whatever it was. I'm just one of those very focused people. And so I went through all my flight lessons and got a job very early in life and got hired with the major airline at 25 years old, which the average age is 35, just to give you some point of reference. So I was pretty young. I was the second youngest person hired at the airline that I was at the time, which was Continental Airlines. And, I didn't know any different. That's all I knew. Right. And so my whole life I had been focused on being a pilot. I studied for it. I learned it. I invested, I was deep in debt for it and everything. So my first place that I got positioned with that airline was in Guam. So I was flying out in the South Pacific, all over Asia, all over Australia, 25 years old. My wife and I were newlyweds. We're out there. And I'm traveling out in that part of the world, just thinking I've got the best job in the world. Like this is
may
even a
have
job.
had the best job in the world.
Yeah, and I mean we're traveling. I mean we were out there for about 3 years. I think we did about 19 trips all to different countries out there. I mean we were bungee jumping in New Zealand. We were up at the DMZ border. I mean to riding elephants in Thailand. I mean you name it, we did it, right? And we got to that point where it's like, okay, after about 3 years, we said, we should probably head back to the States. Our families are out there. They call it the Rock, right? We're on the Rock for a while. It's time to, kind of go. So that was July of 2001. So we arrived back in the States in August of 2001 with all of our stuff on the boat getting shipped over, which takes about 6 weeks. And so I had the best job in the world. Now I'm flying out in the domestic world. I was flying 737s at the time. And, again, up until September 10th, I had the best job, safest, most secure job in the world. And 9/11 happened, obviously, as we all know. It was a very tragic day. And that day basically put in motion the changes of my life that would take me on a whole different trajectory. And the reason I say that, everybody remembers 9/11. And to me, 9/13 was kind of my day. And the reason I say that is that was the day that safe, secure illusion of a job dissolved, because I got sent a furlough notice that said basically, hey, we don't think we're going to need you anymore. So you're going to be out on the street with about 200,000 other airline pilots, and good luck. And what's very humbling is that when you realize you're in that position and all you've ever done is focused on one task in life, which was flying a metal tube around in the sky, basically, you're really not qualified to do anything else. And so it's very humbling where you realize when I started looking, now I hadn't gotten furloughed, but I got the notice saying that within 90 days per contract, they could do this. And the reason they were doing this was they've got shareholders, they have board of directors, and they're protecting the shareholders. They're not protecting the employees. Sure. So, a lot of people don't maybe remember this time, but it was very, very I would say turbulent for the airline, no pun intended, but it was a time where all of a sudden, airlines were having the bird flu disease, the SARS was happening, the oil was going to $140 a barrel. I mean, it was like the locusts were coming next for us. I mean, it was one hit after the other. And what the airlines did was, in order to protect the shareholders, which, at the end of the day, that's their job. Yep. They were going into bankruptcy. They were abrogating contracts. So they were voiding contracts. And they were going into the pilots' pensions and wiping their pensions clean. Oh. And even pilots that had retired they were losing their pension. So imagine you're 70 years old in your golden years, and all of a sudden your money's gone. Sorry. And so I'm watching this evolve, and I'm realizing, man, this is like not as safe and secure as I thought it was. This is the exact opposite. It was almost like this, this sheet had been pulled back, and all of a sudden I'm looking at this whole other world saying, this is not good. Yeah. So then when I started looking for things to do, driving a truck, doing anything, I wasn't qualified. I had no qualifications. Like I could not even drive a commercial truck. And I'm thinking to myself, something's wrong with this picture. Like I can fly an airplane with hundreds of people, but I can't do anything else because I was so specialized and so focused. So I started realizing that I need to have something else. I can't just rely on this job. Now, I got within 30 people. It was about 6,000 pilot seniority list at the time. And I came within 30 people of the bottom of getting furloughed. I got pushed out of Houston. I had to go up to Newark. I was living in Newark at the time, part-time, commuting back to Houston. I didn't complain because I still had a job, right? All of my other buddies that were below me, they were gone. So I'm not complaining, but you're realizing like, wow, I have at the swipe of a pen, at any hiccup, if there's any kind of attack or, something else happens with the airlines, I'm done. Right. And it's very scary for people that have been in a situation where they have no control. Yep. And something else is dictating that I'm just a number. I have nothing to do with if I'm a good pilot, I'm a bad pilot. If I'm a good employee, bad employee, I'm just a cog in a very big wheel. And at the swipe of a pen, that whole section goes away, and it's sorry, we have to keep moving on and protecting the shareholders. Yeah. And so that's what kind of led me towards real estate is in a long-winded story. That's what I do.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think I want to relate this back to what for other people, right? Because I am a firm believer that the business cycle is real. Now, first and foremost, I hope nothing ever close to 9/11 happens again, because that's an external event and was an attack and all of that. So put that to the side. But the business cycle is real. We are currently at sub 4% unemployment, had a strong jobs number today, but the business cycle will snap back. And if you are not thinking about a plan B in the good times, man, I feel bad for you, when ultimately the bad times come. So, so 9/13, you got that notice, you stayed employed. When did you find that plan B? So I understand how you got to real estate, but was it like the first thing you saw, or were you a buy and hold person first, or where did you go after you moved to New York part-time?
So what I started doing is I started trying to understand what do people do, because all I had never known was this aviation language. Yeah. And so I started just trying to understand what do people do that are wealthy? How does that work? So I just started reading books, and everything seemed to be tied back to real estate at one point in their life or something. So I thought, okay, well, as a pilot, a lot of other pilots that own rental properties and that. So you kind of know, like, oh, everybody has that idea, I would like to own some rental property someday, right? That's what you always hear. Yeah. And so I thought, okay, maybe I'll go down this path. So I started reading books on real estate, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, all that series, everything that had to do with it. And it really resonated with me a lot, because I thought, okay, I could still do my airline job, and I can kind of do this on the side, and I can keep learning. But what I realized was, all of a sudden I felt like I was behind the curve, because now I believe I was about 29 years old. Okay. And I thought, man, I've wasted all these years. Like, all these people are ahead of me. I'm very competitive. So I'm thinking, all people are beating me in this world. I've got to step it up. So I started reading a book a week on real estate. I mean, I was voracious. Wow. I was reading as much as I could. I remember going to the library in my pilot uniform, and people would look at me like, what are you doing? And I'm getting books on real estate, and and so it just, I didn't care. I was so focused on what I needed to do. So I didn't know what to do. So I hired a mentor to train me. I forget what it was, $10,000, whatever. And he taught me how to do flipping. Okay. And it was more like options. At the time they didn't have a term for wholesaling, but essentially that's what it was. I was wholesaling with option contracts. And so he explained that to me, double closings and all that stuff. So I started doing that without really knowing. I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, he's like, you do this, you make it happen. I didn't ask questions. I didn't know enough to talk myself out of it, to tell me why it wouldn't work. I just did, to me, it's like, I'll do what I'm told. That's what I'm do. I'm going to build up some capital, and then I'll go down the road and do something else. So, okay. And again, I felt safe because I wasn't actually owning the properties. I wasn't coming out of pocket. I was putting an option on it and getting paid. And so I did that for a couple of years, and I got very, very good at it. And I was doing a lot of transactions, and it was working well.
So real quick, Steve, is this 2003, 2004? Is that kind of when this is?
Yeah, this is 2002.
Oh, okay.
Like, I mean,
wow,
I started
fast.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was hitting the ground running. So this is about mid 2002.
All right.
Up until about, I'm going to say, well, in about 2003, 2004, about 2004, I wanted to start owning real estate.
Okay.
So I joined a local real estate group in Houston. And I always knew that was the path I wanted, because I knew that wholesaling, flipping, that was just a job, right? I mean, I was just busy. I was making more money, but it was just a job. But I was learning as well. I was getting educated at the time, learning terminologies and everything that goes along with that, closings and title companies. So I joined this investing group, and I had enough money, and they were more geared towards buying apartment complexes.
Ah, okay.
And so I ended up going and buying an apartment complex with a business partner. There was 4 of us that did it. And he's still my business partner today, the one gentleman, Pete. We went in 4s with some other people. We bought this complex. We owned the complex for a couple years. It's funny, I wanted to learn about the apartments. He wanted to learn about the wholesaling. It's the grass is greener theory.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, I want to learn about owning and buying and holding. He's like, why do you want to learn that? He's like, I want to learn what you're doing. You know, you're making $10,000, $20,000 every time you flip a property. I want to learn that. And I'm like, yeah, but that's a job. I want to do it. So it's funny. So basically I taught him, he taught me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so after that, we did very well. We sold the apartment complex. We exited about 2007, 2008.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the reason we were able to exit that deal was because it was a C property in an A area. And it was one of those areas that was getting regentrified, and it was becoming nicer. And so, you know, everywhere around us, they were just tearing down these properties and putting up these Victorian style verticals. And so the church next door actually saw this coming, and they approached us and said, hey, we want to buy this because we know this is going to be these houses, and we need space for the church. Okay. And I didn't know this at the time, but churches pay cash. So basically what ended up happening was the economy started crashing, didn't phase them at all. They had the cash, they closed on it, they said no problem. So basically, I hate to say it, but they basically paid a lot of money and they turned it into a parking lot, is what they did. They needed the space, so it's a parking lot to this day.
Yeah.
But they said it is what it is. So anyways, so after that, we started buying houses. We took this money and we thought we were flipping, but we saw it slowing. We had our buyers list and our sellers list and everything, but we noticed that the buyers list was starting to shrink up and the sellers list was growing. So to me, that's an indicator. All of a sudden I'm going, man, this is slowing a little bit. And then we started thinking, why don't we just create some wealth for ourselves? Like we at the time we thought we were the smartest guys in the world. Like we just sold the apartment complex. We're smart. We can do this. And so we thought, let's just do this. And big mistake, first of all, don't ever think that you're too smart, because life has a tendency to teach you lessons very quickly. And so I had already owned a couple rentals that I had kept from flipping.
Sure.
And my business partner, he had owned some apartments as well before, duplexes. So one day he comes to me and he says, hey man, he goes, I got an idea. I'm like, what's up? He says, well, I found these deals. They're in the pond that everyone's fishing in. They're in the price point. There's tons of them and they make huge amounts of money. And I'm like, okay, well, what are they? He's like, they're called low income, high cash flow properties. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, what's the deal? He's like, we can get as many as we want. He's like, and there's a ton of them. And he's like, that's a market that everybody rents. They're easy to put in. He's like, we can do this. And I'm like, okay, well, why just buy one? Let's buy 20 of them.
Yeah.
So in the next year and a half, he and I go on a buying spree, and we're just buying these houses, right? And we're the smartest guys in the world, right? We're buying these houses. And, our goal is to own 50 to 100 of these things, down in the ghetto, basically. And, we're buying them for $50,000 and we're renting them for $700, $800 a month, right? So the cash on cash is strong. Everything's looking good. And then these people called tenants started calling us and they started having problems and they started having maintenance and and all of a sudden I'm thinking, why are these people calling us? Like what, like this is not part of the plan. And then they start skipping out. And then there's maintenance. And next thing you know, like all of a sudden, it's like it had been bubbling, and all of a sudden it just started popping everywhere on us. And so he and I are doing like whack-a-mole, you know, our tenants are leaving us. When they leave, so our average tenancy was about 8 months. So they were turning very quickly because it's a low income area.
Yeah.
The make ready costs were 3 times the amount because when they left, they would take parting gifts with them, like wiring, electrical, you know, they would take plants, toilets. I mean, we'd go to a house and it'd be like a rehab all over again. We're like, how could they do this that quickly? I mean, they were quick, you know, I must have supplied half of Southeast Houston with air conditioning units because they stole them. Like our biggest task was to figure out how to secure these ACs. I mean, we caged them, we welded them, and they would still figure a way. And I'm like, if they would just pay their rent with as much energy as they do with trying to steal our stuff, they would be living here very happy. Yeah. Anyway, so in our infinite wisdom, and we thought the best way to fix this was buy more of them.
Of course.
Of course, right? Because we didn't learn our lesson the first time. So now we're sitting at about 33, 35 of these things.
Okay.
And it was like putting gasoline on a fire and it just exploding in our faces. And now in hindsight, you sit back and you go, well, no wonder there's no way that would work. At the time, we thought we're halfway through the mountain. Let's just keep on pushing through. And, you know,
scale's going to help. Scale will help.
Scale will help. It'll help on the downside just as quick as the upside for people that want to know.
Yes.
But what we learned is that a valuable lesson for people that are watching this is that when you have tunnel vision and you're so focused on fixing something, sometimes the answer is not to fix it. Sometimes the answer is to audibilize and pivot somewhere else. And I was so focused on fixing the problem, and my wife was doing the books at the time. And she's like, the numbers don't work. Like, you guys this is not going to work. And I'm like, yeah. I can fix it. I can make it work. And she was like, it's not. So of course, you know, then we'd buy a house here, and she's like, did you buy another house? And I'm like, yeah, we picked up another one. And she's like, what are you doing? She's like, it's not going to work. And at one point, basically she sat me down and was like, you suck at buying houses. You need to stop. Like, you guys are no good at this. This is not working at all.
Good for her.
And, yeah. So, cause she's like, I see the numbers. Like, I'm the sales guy, right? So I'm like, oh, these are 30% cash on cash. This is this. Once we get these problems fixed, it'll be done. But when these problems were fixed, those problems arise.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, they're older houses. So when the electrical goes out and an electrician goes, it's like, I can't just fix that. I got to rewire the whole thing. Yeah. And now the city needs to come and you got to pull a permit. And so it was a compounding effect of multiple problems.
Yeah.
And so basically after our conversation, you know, we sit down and it's like, okay, we're obviously not good at this. This is not working. So my business partner, Pete, and I, we sit down and say, okay, we have 3 options. The one option is we just sell all these. Let's just sell them and walk away.
Yep.
But we both believed in real estate, and we didn't want to go down that path because we realized that that's not the way to wealth.
Yep. So
the second option was we hand them over to a management company. That management company handles it. They deal with it. It's no longer our problem. The third option is that he and I figure out how to systemize and structure it ourselves, and we run it in our own management world.
Yep.
Because we had run apartments. We knew what to do. We just weren't doing it because when you're so emotionally attached, you're trying your hardest to make it work, and you're bypassing all rules of logic because now this is like, I can tell him what to do, but that doesn't work for me. I got to do what I got to do. You know, it's like, do as I say, not as I preach, basically.
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening from there is this was 2010, 2011-ish. So, you know, during that time frame, nobody could get a loan.
Yep.
So buying the properties was not an option, right? And any investor that wanted them at such a steep discount, it was even lower than what we bought them at. And we're like, well, we're not going to do that. Like, they're slowly killing us with a spoon, but it's not stabbing us with a knife, kind of. You know, it's like it's a slow bleed. So we go, okay, that's not an option. So he says, well, I'll tell you what, let me make some phone calls to some management companies and let me see what we have and let me see what the offer is. Like, okay, Rock, do your deal, man. So he calls me up like a week later and he's like, we got a problem. I'm like, did we buy another house? Like, that I don't know about? Did it have a baby? Like, what happened? He's like, nobody wants them. I'm like, what do you mean nobody wants them? He says, nobody wants our properties. I'm like they won't manage them? He's like, no. He goes, they said, they're too much work. They're never going to make money. This is just a huge headache and we're screwed. Basically was the conversation. Wow. I'm like going, rewinding in my brain to the first time he told me about these winning deals. I'm like, but you told me these were great deals. I'm like, you told me,
yes,
this is a pond that everyone's fishing in, that we can buy them, we can sell them this, and he's like, oops. I was wrong.
Yeah.
So, we're both very logical, not emotional. And, being an airline pilot in that, you learn how to work the problems. I'm like, okay, let's work the problem. Let's come up with a solution. We know we have a problem. Now let's work through it.
Yeah.
So we sit down and we start really looking and going, okay, the only option we have is to fix this ourselves. We're obviously not the best business people in the world, and we're not the smartest, but we're not the dumbest, right? I know airline business, structure, systems, checklists, all that from Boeing. He was running an IT department for a very large company. We knew what to do. So basically we sat down and we said, okay, here's the deal. We are going to run these like a business. And if we have to kick out all these deadbeat tenants and redo this, we're going to do it. But we're going to, non-emotional, we're going to create rules, we're going to create structure, and we're going to stick to it. So we did that. It took us about 9 months for us to sit down and really plumb, from an investor's perspective, how we wanted this thing to run. And so we really structured this thing on through. And then we started enforcing it.
Yeah.
And about, I'm going to say within about 4 or 5 months, we kicked out about 70% of our tenants. Deadbeats, and they weren't paying anyways, right? I mean, they were just taking up air, basically.
Yeah.
And so basically what we ended up doing was we put in the right people, we set the proper expectations. Like, I used to do stuff like, I would put signs out at like 3 a.m, like these bandit signs of, bad credit okay, rent deposit special, must rent, right? So these are all action words for someone to contact me, but guess who contacts you? The people with shitty credit, the people that need to, they would drive up with stuff in their car at that day going, I can move in right now. And you're like, oh, perfect, but then they're gone and they take half the house with them. But anyways, so we eliminated all that. We eliminated any emotions, and we said, we're going to stick to it. So after about 6 months of us running it that way, they started to stabilize. And they never actually made us a lot of money, but they weren't kind of bleeding us to death.
Yeah. And
so what we realized was, we said, okay, this is stabilizing, fixing problems, doing it the right way, investing capital, investing money to the properties, setting proper expectations with the tenant. And then what happened was all of a sudden we had other people approach us. And they were like, hey, could you guys manage our house? Well, first they said, what happened to you guys? We thought you guys were going out of business, going into bankruptcy. And we said, well, here's what we did. Started running like a business structure. And they said, man, that's the exact problems I'm having. Could you take care of mine? And I'm like, no, we don't want your problems. Like, we barely fixed ours. I don't want to deal with your drama. Like, that's not, I'm an airline pilot,
Yeah.
But then we thought about it. And we thought, okay, well, there's economies of scale, like you said earlier. We can do volume.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, it's not our property. So, again, when you get a vacancy in a property or you get a make ready, you're feeling the hit, right? You get a vacancy, you got the make ready cost, you got the vacancy, you got to relet it. So there's cost. And on top of that, as we all know as investors, the mental stress. There's a lot of mental stress that goes into, being a problem solver with people's problems. I can't control how someone lives their life and pays their rent or gets a DUI or whatever their problems are. I can't dictate that, but I'm reaping the benefit or the curse of their actions, basically.
Yeah.
So basically what happened was then we started managing properties, and then everybody started throwing properties at us. And so we were like becoming ghetto kings, right? Everybody was throwing their ghetto properties because they're like, well, you guys know what to do. Here's another 5. And so one day my business partner, Pete's like, how many properties do we own? And I'm like, I think about 35. He's like, why do we have 80 properties that in our software? And I'm like, yeah, I've been getting a couple more for other people. And he's like, what? I'm like, yeah, I've been getting a couple more, and they wanted me to manage them. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, so I'm like the salesman, right? I'm kind of the one that does it first and then kind of explain it as I go. So we start managing these people's properties, and that kind of was the spark of what the property management company is that I own today. But that's kind of the evolution of what I did with real estate. And we ended up eventually selling those properties, those low income, even during we just could never figure a way to make them work. And so at one point we finally said, which was a huge aha moment for me, is somebody was like, why don't you just sell them? And I was like, well, we can't sell them. We'll lose money. And he's like, you think you're not losing money now?
Yeah.
You really think you're not losing money when you have a vacancy and they leave and you got to make ready and this? He's like, you already lost money. He's like, it's already sinking. Just cut the tie. And so I talked to my business partner and I'm like, hey man, what are your thoughts on this? And he's like, done. I mean, it was like within seconds, he's like, done. Let's get rid of him. So for the next year and a half, we focused on getting rid of them. And what we did is we did a lot of owner financing to other investors. So we had a lot of, this was when the Canadian dollar was much stronger than the US dollar.
Okay.
And so we had a lot of Canadians that were coming in buying real estate, but they can't get loans.
Sure.
So we basically talked to them and said, hey, here's the deal. We have these rental properties. This is the situation with them. We will sell them to you on an owner finance, and then we will keep managing the property for you. We'll give you a discount on the management. We'll do everything, but know what you're buying. And you're buying it on cash flow, on a cash flow scenario. This is what it's renting for. This is the history. And so with some we sold outright, but a lot of them we sold to investors up in Canada. And that's how we exited a lot of those deals.
Very, very cool. Just lots of questions on that summary. So the exit to the Canadian investors was like 2013, 14 kind of?
Yeah, I'm going to say 14 into 15. It took about a year and a half to exit all of them.
All right, very cool. The other thing I want to talk about is I think there's a lot of investors from at least California, I assume from Texas as well, that feel like they can't get return in their backyard anymore. So they're going Detroit, Cleveland, Huntsville, these other markets. Mm-hmm. And my fear is, unbeknownst to them, is they're going to be investing in the hood, right? And the hood's as good as it could be in a great economy, but it doesn't last. And, you and I have both bought stuff in the hoods and suffered that, that downside. So is that, do you see the same fear? Because we talk to kind of the same people.
Yes. So just to give you a point of perspective, my company, we manage about 1,000 properties in Houston, Dallas, and Fort Worth. And about 50 to 60% of all of our clients do not live in Texas or in the country. A lot of people from the West Coast. We get a lot of West Coast people. And yes, you get a lot of people that, they get this fear, right? A lot of investors, they want to dump the money and stick their head in the sand and go, just deal with it. I don't want to know. And I think that could be the worst scenario model, right? I tell them, I said, listen, let's back this up. I tell them, when you own a rental property, you own a business.
Yes.
4 walls and a roof is not going to ensure success, right? I know a lot of people like you do that have bought great deals and they've run them right into the ground.
Yes.
Because of the bad business model. And what do I explain to them is you are running a business. The property management company is the operating system inside that 4 walls and the roof.
Yep.
You are the CEO of that business, which means you are responsible to make sure that you are getting the proper data to make smart decisions as the CEO of your company. We are a piece of your puzzle, whether it's a realtor, inspector, hard money lender, rehabber, whatever. We are all a piece of your company. And to put your head in the sand and say, I trust you, I don't want to deal with it. I'm like, that could be the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You would deserve to get ripped off if you don't educate yourself. I hate to say deserve, that's probably not the right word, but it would not surprise me that more people get ripped off because they don't take the time to educate themselves. They want the easy button. I tell them, if you want the easy button, then you should go buy a mutual fund or buy into a REIT.
Yep.
Don't go buying a business in Alabama if you don't know the layout and you don't know the market and you don't know the target.
Yeah.
So what I explain to investors whenever I talk to them is I even take it back more elementary. And I want to know, why are they even investing? Like what is their why? Why do they want to even do this? Why this over stocks? Like, explain that to me. And then I tell them, tell me, how does your life look as a result in 20 years from now? What does that look like? Do you own a bunch of assets? Are you passing it down to your children? Are you living on the cash flow? And let's define, what is that number? Is it $20,000 a month? Is it 5,000? Is it 100,000? Let's define that, because to me, that's the end goal. That's the destination in your life that you want to go in your real estate life. Mm-hmm. Then we create the strategy for that. And the strategy are the freeways to get you there. So if you want to go to Disneyland, you're not just going to jump on the 5 North freeway from LA and head northbound and think you're going to get there, right? You're not going to get to your destination. Owning real estate is saying, okay, what freeways do I need to take to get there? And those freeways are the types of properties that you need in order to get you to the goal, which is part of the plan. Yeah. And what I explained to them, I said, when you're looking at a deal, right? And I'm getting somewhere with what you said. When you're looking at a deal, and that deal's in Huntsville, Alabama, and you were to look at it just like a stock, right? Because real estate is a mathematical equation. There is no emotion involved. Just like buying Chase stock or Carrier stock or GM stock, you don't buy it for anything other than what the numbers and the dividends and the returns are getting you, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. So based on that, based on the returns, does that property align with your strategy to get you to your goal? And if the answer is no, then I would say you don't buy it.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? So it's like, and I tell people, I go, once your money goes hot and you own that deal, that is not the time to try to make it work and fit into your strategy. Yeah, and that's what people do, right? That's why they get a property management company at the end, and they get this cheap, low service company because they never factored that into their business model. So they never thought about it. So now it's down the road and they're going, well, who's going to manage this thing? Because I tell people, I go, anybody can get a good deal. Look, you can swing a dead cat and end up getting a good deal at one point. If you throw out 1,000 offers, you're going to get a steal, right?
Right.
But how are you going to get that return month after month, year after year to the destination?
Yeah.
And exactly. That's why you need to have the right people on your team. So basically what I tell them is before you do any of this, create your goal, define that, create your strategy, whether you do it or you have someone help you, someone that knows, and then you go find the city and the team that are on your team to help you achieve that goal.
Yep.
And then you set those expectations. So then when you're looking at it, like I tell people, when you're looking at a deal, I want you to come to me and say, hey, Steve, what do you think? Does this work? And I'm going to go, first thing I'm going to say is, does this align with your strategy to get you to your goal?
Yep.
If you can't tell me that, I can't tell you if it's a good deal.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and so that's kind of how I do it. So yeah, so there's a lot of people that get ripped off. And I think they get ripped off because they allow themselves to get ripped off. They allow themselves to put themselves in bad positions because they don't sharpen their mental axe. Yep. And I tell them, I go, look, take the time to educate yourself before you even get into this arena. Yeah. Know what you want. Be very, very clear, because the deal of a lifetime is probably passing you by once a week. But if you don't know what it is, you're never going to see it.
Exactly. So one more quick question before we get into your book. And it was really something that I just want to go back to. Basically, you, the sales guy, saw 30% cash on cash, all of these actuals, which I call Excel math. And then your wife is going, honey, I have the cash flow statement. I got actuals. There's a difference. Let's sit down and have a conversation. That's just a reality. And I think too many people believe the Excel spreadsheet as opposed to the actuals. They want to excuse the actuals. Oh, that's a one-time thing, or oh, this, or oh, that. Any thoughts on that? I
think what happens is a lot of times people, look, I will talk myself into a deal, right? I can say, well, if I can get a little more in rent because this house is nicer. So instead of being $1,200, I could probably get $1,295. And if I do this, and let's say the vacancy is not as much, all of a sudden I'm like, wow, that's a good deal.
Yeah. Excel.
And my wife would be sitting there going, yeah. So my wife would be sitting there going like, you just basically twisted the numbers to make it match what you need. I'm like, deal. Like, so you see what I see.
I'm glad we agree.
Yeah. And so the point of all this is she was not involved in the acquisition side. It was me and my business partner. So me being the ultimate salesman, I would always talk him into why we should buy that deal. And he's like, okay, let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah.
She was the after effect. She was the one that she would get the HUD statement and the numbers and the rent and, and not working and matching. So she didn't have any say in the acquisition phase. She had the say in the number phase, when we'd have to do a cash call because we ran out of money and we had to pay the taxes at the end of the year.
Yep.
That's when she would got to voice her concern or opinions.
Very cool. Well, hey, do me a favor now. Flash up your book. Tell people where they can find it, what's all in it. You have such a wonderful story. People need to go get it.
Yeah. So this book, Building an Empire, is like every investor, right? When you are in the heat of battle, the way Pete and I were, and we went through hurricanes and we went through, drug raids on our properties. And I mean, it goes on and on. And, you joke and we're like, man, one day we should write a book. Like this is like book material. Like you're thinking to myself, this doesn't normally happen. And so that's kind of where the evolution of the book came from, because it really just tells our story very, some of what I talked about earlier. And a lot of it is kind of how we took our model and took it to scale
Yep.
and scaled it out, and still have, and again, still have trials and tribulations, still have challenges. And as an investors reading this book, I've had a lot of people that, even the editor that helped me edit it, he said, man, he goes, I got to tell you, he goes, I had a couple parts and I was just laughing, envisioning you and your business partner, in this ghetto property with cockroaches on you, and you're, in your pilot uniform, and, and it's just, you go through this story, which a lot of people have, that they can resonate with. So it is on sale on Amazon. You can go to Amazon. It's called Building an Empire, Failing My Way to Millions. And you can go to my website, steverosenberg.com. It's there as well. And again, it's just a way, I think, for, Pete and I have been coached by business coaches since day one. And that's in the story. But what we learned by being coached by business coaches is that, we are running a business, and that's how I've learned to talk to other investors about running the business and testing and measuring and KPIs. And, we kind of go through how you go through these iterations of growth to contraction to growth, whether it's financially or mentally, and how to work through problems. I mean, I remember, in the story, I talk about going through Hurricane Ike, and we lost 20 roofs, and, our houses got flooded, and, we're sitting there driving around, looking at all these houses in this fog, and all of a sudden it hit me. I'm like, if the tenants can't live in the property, they can't pay their rent. If they can't pay their rent, how are we going to pay our mortgage? You know what I mean? And this is, so we're going through how we had to work these problems and come up with these things. And so the book is it's a good book. It's a quick read. It's 100 pages or so. And what's interesting is you sit there and go, man, I thought my life had more than 100 pages, but the reality is it's really, it kind of just dives in and from the beginning to really show people that you're not alone out there. I mean, we go through it. I mean, we have a very successful company. It does very well. Like I said, we manage 1,000 properties, but it's a brick by brick scenario. I mean, we have fought and scratched and screamed to get there. And it's, again, I just wanted to tell my story from airline pilot to where we are and where we're going, and kind of how we did it, basically.
That's awesome. So I love this. This has been just as much fun as I thought it would be. I look forward to reading that book. It's going to be awesome. How else can people follow you? You're doing lots of things. What else you got going on?
Yeah. So they can follow me on Facebook, Steve Rosenberg, and I've got Steve Rosenberg Professional. I do a lot of speaking events. I speak for NARPM at a lot of their events, whether it's a local chapter, if somebody wants me to come speak there, as well as at the national level. I also do stuff in Australia. I speak down there. And I do a lot of investor speaking events. So if somebody wants me to come speak at their investing group, meetup groups, I've been to Seattle and Los Angeles and other places. And really, it's just a matter of helping investors when they want to learn to be better. If they go to my website, steverosenberg.com, or if they go to my property management website, Empire Industries LLC, both of those, they go to the blog page. I probably have about 300 video blogs of me talking about things to know as an investor. Why does my vendor keep ripping me off? How to pick the best tenant? What do I do when my tenant won't pay? So these are educational videos to help investors because, and I'm not sure about you, but when I got involved in this, there was nobody there to help me and give me these answers. I had to figure it out on my own. So to me, if I can help other investors with that, I'll do that. And part of that was, I have a Facebook group. It's called the Landlord Survival Group.
Yeah.
Everyone's free to join. And basically, it's just investors there. I don't want anyone selling anything in this group, but to talk about like fair housing things that are changing. Yeah. And I have wholesalers and flippers on there. I have a podcast show called the Landlord Survival Show. That podcast show gets some very successful flippers, wholesalers, buy and hold people, and we talk about their story. But more importantly, what I want to know from them, I don't want to hear how great they are. I want to hear about the failures and how they overcame those failures. And what are they doing now to compound on the failure to success to expand it? So that's really what I talk to them. I kind of get down and dirty with them to hear what makes them tick, when they have that failure, right? Because, like they say, everyone has a plan to get punched in the face, right? So when they get punched in the face, what gets them to get back up and keep going and not kind of go back to a job? Yep. And so that's a lot of stuff that we talk about on the podcast show. I also created a website called selfmanagemyproperty.com. On there, Pete and I, created a manual called the Ultimate Landlord Survival Handbook.
Hmm.
And it's there to help the single investor that has 1 or 2 properties. And it's really a reference guide that we have on there that they can buy. And it's to help them manage their properties if they want to self-manage. And my whole thing is when I speak to groups, I explain to them, listen, I don't care if you self-manage or you use a property manager. You're running a business and you need to create structure, policies, and procedures because there's a lot of laws out there and there's a lot of laws that will get you in trouble.
Amen.
And so whatever path you take, you can either buy my manual and run it. And that's how we run our business, through this manual. I mean, it explains fair housing laws and it explains, dangerous animals breeds and, how to accept it as a tenant and what you should put on an application. So we really, because look, if you own 2 properties, right, you may not have a vacancy once, but every 2 years, right? So you may not need that. And you're going, I don't really need a management company, but I would like to know, what should I get ready for a make ready, or what is a violation of fair housing? So that's what this manual's for. And that's what we created. So they can go to my website, selfmanagemyproperty.com. They can take a look. I have free information there. But again, I focus on educating as much as I can. I'm not here to sell people. I'm here to educate because nobody was there to help me when I was learning. I had to do it myself. So it's just a way for me to give back and help people out so that they can become better at investing in the investing world.
Well, Steve, this has been so much fun. Thank you for all you do. You have a great story. It's nice to see all the different points, right? You just kept climbing the mountain, kept pivoting. It was fun. I appreciate your time, man.
No problem. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I'm sure I'll see people out there in the battlefield somewhere.
You got it, man.
Bye-bye.